Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rams Review podcast. It's Cory. Jason's not able to join us today, but alas, I am not alone to discuss things about Derby County because I have a legend with me, a living legend, none other than the white-booted, blonde hair winger, Gladys, Mr. Alan Hinton. Alan, how are we?
I'm doing great. I'm getting old, but coming on podcasts with people like you, Cory, is really, it's a fun time, and I have no notes. I just fire away, and let's have some fun.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is awesome. You're one of those players that I grew up with stories of, and I guess the stories are now legends. I've grown up with the legends of them, and you are a measuring stick for players that I measure Derby County players against today, which I'm sure you've watched Derby recently. It's probably not the smartest thing to do because they couldn't tie your shoelaces. But I want to start at the beginning of your career in 1959 because you started as a trainee at Wolves. Was when you were growing up as a lad, was being a professional footballer always part of the plan for you, or did you want to do something else? And then how did you get into playing football?
Well, I lived in a working class town, industrial town called Wednesbury, which is halfway between Wolverhampton and West Bromwich, and quite near to Birmingham. So I was really, and Warsaw was just down the road from me, about a mile. So there was a lot of soccer around, football in those days, of course, but it became the love of my life. My friend Roy Morley and I, each Saturday, I don't know whether it rained or shined, but we didn't care. It was Saturday. And we'd sometimes walk the 8 miles to Wolves, and then the next week we'd walk or get the bus if we'd made to find a few pennies from somewhere to West Brom. So 1 week it was Wolves, 1 week it was West Brom. In the midweek, we'd go as far as Villa, Birmingham, Warsaw. And it was a wonderful experience. And then I started falling in love with autograph collecting. In those days, the players would actually write their name so you could understand and read their names. But today, they just scribble their numbers or whatever. So it's not the same, I don't think. But it was a great time growing up. I was lucky enough to go to the church school, St. Bartholomew's in Wednesbury. I was also head boy in the big church choir. And our headmaster, Bob Davison, was also the soccer coach. But he was also the coach of Southeast Staffordshire boys team, which is like a select team. So I advanced and played on all those teams. But my best friend was the brick wall in the playground. I mean, that brick wall, the beautiful thing about a brick wall is the ball always comes back to you. So I used to shoot with Roy Morley, bang, 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 bang. And then a guy that used to walk past our house on his way home from work, he once said to me, he said, young man, he said, if you keep playing like that, he says, you'll be a professional one day. Now that was encouragement at the time when you really didn't get any encouragement from anybody. And I guess he was out there every night at 5:30 kicking the ball, me. So this guy could say nice things to me. And I got all kinds of support, plus West Bromwich Albion came to sign me. Vic Buckingham was a very handsome, good manager at the time. I might have signed for them, but they didn't want me on the ground staff. And then George Noakes, who was the chief scout of Wolves, lived in my town, Wednesbury. He came to see my mum and dad, and he immediately wanted me on the ground staff, which meant full-time work, sweeping the... So in 1957, I joined the ground staff. And that was an experience, being around Billy Wright and Ron Flowers and Peter Broadbent. They were my heroes. You know, cleaning up their uniforms and cleaning their boots was a pleasure. I mean, I was on the inside all of a sudden as a kid. And I remember one day, you know, I was a bit shy, believe it or not, blonde-haired kid, 5'7", 139 pounds, I think, when I was left school at 15, or just short of 15. And the players used to have fun with me, and I didn't know how to handle it. So Peter Broadbent called me over one day and he said, Alan, you don't seem to like it when those boys when the players have some fun with you. I said, no, I don't like it. They're taking the mickey out of me. He says, they're doing it because they think you're going to be a top player. And that was coaching. And the older players and Wolves had many, many superstars winning, going into Europe for the first time ever before the Champions League started. Wolves were really a pioneer in the game. And I had a nice little 5, 6, 7 years there. I don't know exactly how long, but it was a wonderful time. And of course, I never had a car, so I was on the bus with the fans. And it was a great time in my life. It was certainly a wonderful beginning for me in my long career.
Yeah, that Wolves side of the early 60s is one that I've grown up with stories of, on how the Molyneux pitch used to be. And they used to water the field before the European games, so that the European continentals didn't know how to play on the Molyneux pitch and everything like that. And, then in 1961, you make your Wolves debut and you go from, like you say, cleaning up the kit of your boyhood heroes, namely Billy Wright, and you're in the dressing room with him. Was that a different experience? Because obviously you've been around the group for a couple of years, but was it a different experience sitting in a first team changing room, looking across these people that you idolize, and how good was Billy Wright, and your memories of that debut game?
Well, they were all so modest. Only a few of them had a car. I think the maximum wage was probably £20 a week. Billy Wright one day said to me, he'd been sent a new pair of Tom Finney boots. It was a great player, Tom Finney. And Billy came to me and he said, would I help break in these shoes for him? And I was thrilled. The problem for Billy was I was scoring a boatload of goals in the third and fourth and sometimes second team. And I think Billy didn't want to take the boots back because I was hot. I was scoring goals, and he never got them back. And I never offered to give him back. But that was the kind of feeling. Now today, the amount of money in the game and the amount of sponsorship dollars these players have, they have equipment. I mean, in my day, if you'd have given your shirt to the opposition, you'd have had to go and ask for it back because you wouldn't have had one for the next week. And the uniforms at the Wolves were washed by Eddie Clamp's mom. Eddie Clamp's mother lived down the street, Waterloo Road, from the ground. She used to hand wash the beautiful gold. It was the best uniform in the country. Still very, very impressive. The gold, the all gold and black, is wonderful. And on a Friday morning, me and a couple of the lads on the ground staff, we'd go down to Mrs. Clamp and we'd hand carry for 6 teams the uniforms to the locker room to send them out either in the skip bags or place them for the game on the Saturday. But it was a wonderful upbringing for me, and it made me into a man and a better player. Thank you.
And so you were at Wolves, and during that time at Wolves, you quickly established yourself as a first choice in there. And then quickly afterward, you got the call to represent England. What was it like when you got the call from the FA that they were gonna call you up for England? And what was it like to make your debut against France and put that 3 lions over your heart?
Well, that's another story. I didn't have a car. My mate Johnny Kirkham also lived in Wednesbury. David Reed, Slipper Reed, lived in West Bromwich. So all 3 of us, we caught the bus from Wolverhampton. We got off in Bilston on the 90 bus for the sole purpose of going to the betting shop to have a bet on the horses, because almost everybody on the staff used to bet on the horses. There was always a tip or another flying around. So I'm in the betting shop, and a guy comes in and he goes, bloody Alan Hinton's been picked for England. And I go, that's me. And it was amazing how I found out, because today you got cell phones and texts and emails, but that's how I found out. So I went home quickly on the bus, and my dad and I went down the pub that night. I don't think I bought a drink, not that I drank too much in those days, a couple of pints. But he was very proud of me. And then there was a problem, a potential problem that I think I handled very well. I got picked for England, and it was on a Wednesday. I think it was October 21. And I was scheduled to get married to my dear wife, Joy. We're still married happily, at 11 o'clock on Monday morning at St. Paul's Church in Wednesbury. So now I've got a problem or an issue. So I called Alf. Obviously, he was playing Alf then, but then he was obviously Sir Alf, well-deserved after we won the World Cup 1966. So I phoned him up and I go, and I'm so proud even today the way I handled it, because if I would have said, I got a problem, you know what he would have said? No, you don't. I'll get somebody else. But I said to him, I said, look, I'm looking forward to the game. I'm so thrilled you picked me. I have an issue. And I told him what the issue was, that I was scheduled to get married 11 o'clock Monday morning in Wednesbury. And I was supposed to meet the team at 5 o'clock in the afternoon that day at the Hendon Hall Hotel with the England team. So he said, hey, congratulations. I'll see you at 7 o'clock at the hotel, which gave me an extra 2 hours. So the wedding went on. And of course, the wedding, instead of being a quiet 40, 50 people at the wedding, became a national story. It was all over television, BBC. The police were controlling the traffic. It was a wonderful time. And but of course, it went from being a quiet wedding into a national story. So it all worked out nicely. I did play for England. I was credited with scoring against Belgium, but in today's rules, it would have probably been given an own goal. But that was the beginning of me playing for England. And Stan Cullis, I'd only played 26 games in the first team for Wolves. And Stan Cullis, he wouldn't shake my hand. He says, you're not ready. And I didn't like that, but that's the way Stan was, very strong, very forceful. And maybe he was right. But I did play in the game. We tied 2-2 against Belgium, a good team, at Wembley, first time I played there. And it was the beginning of, we've been married 41 years now, and excuse me, nearly over 50 years, nearly 55 years. And I've got 3 wonderful grandchildren and a great daughter. So
you broke the news to Sir Alf Ramsey. How did you break the news to Mrs. Hinton?
Well, she was thrilled. And I'll tell you a funny story, though. She wanted top hat and tails at the wedding. And my dad was an ordinary working class man, a good man named Tommy. He said, when I asked him, or I told him he'd got to wear top hat and tails at the wedding, he says, son, don't try and be something you ain't. So I said, okay, well, if you don't wear the top hat and tails, Dad, you won't be able to come to the wedding. Anyway, reluctantly, he put the top hat on and the tails, and he was a handsome man, and he looked like Douglas Fairbanks Jr. He looked fabulous. So he wouldn't take it off. And I had to go to him and say, Dad, it's rented. We've got to take it back, you know. And but he absolutely loved it. But his initial response was, as a working class Wednesbury man, be something you're not, son. But you know, it was a wonderful time, and you know, obviously, you know, I was playing for Nottingham Forest then, and that was a nice little time in our life.
How did the move? So that's what I wanted to move on to next, and it's a perfect segue. Is your move to Forest? I mean, you grew up near Molyneux. You supported Wolves as a young lad. Why move to Forest, and how did that move come about at this time? Because, you know, moves come about, obviously there's a lot more agents involved in the game now and those kind of things. Like, why move and how did the move come
Cory,
about?
sorry, excuse me interrupting, but you've done your homework, haven't you?
I have done my homework. I have done my homework.
So you're making me tell them the story now, and it's an embarrassing story, but it's true, and I'll cover it in my book, obviously. So we were playing against Nottingham Forest. The team wasn't doing great, and I'm on my favourite side, the far side of the Molyneux. The fans were great to me. I always used to play along the touchline. They were almost, I probably knew most of them. They were so good to me. And this one day we're playing Forest and we're not playing well. And the crowd are booing. And being the sensitive type, I thought they were booing me. So stupidly, I put my two fingers up in the air like that. Shouldn't have done it. Turns out they were booing Chris Crowe, who was also in the Wolves team at the time. And so after the game, we lost. Forest were too good for us. Cullis called me into the office on the Friday before the next game, and he said, we've just made a deal with Nottingham Forest, and Johnny Carey, their manager, wants to meet with you, and I'm going to sell you. He gave me no opportunity to apologize to the fans, which I've done ever since. It was a misunderstanding. I know the fans would have forgiven me if I'd have had the opportunity to say I was sincerely sorry. So I go, I don't want to go to Forest, I'm staying here. So that weekend, he didn't play me in any team. So I spent the weekend thinking very deeply about, and I came to the conclusion, if he doesn't want me, the manager, I'm better off not staying here. So I went in on the Monday and I said, Mr. Cullis, I agreed to meet Johnny Carey. So I met him, and he was a very, very charming Irishman, Gentleman John, they called him, and quite rightly. So he sold me on Nottingham Forest, and I agreed to go there. But in all reality, I would never have left. But fortunately for me, and unfortunately for the Wolves club, the Wolves went down slightly, and Forest had a wonderful, I had 3 out of 4 years at Forest. It was absolutely super. We got to the semi-final of the Cup one year, lost against Tottenham. Damn, Jimmy Greaves scored a couple of goals, or he scored one from outside the box.
Jimmy Greaves was okay, I guess. He was a decent player.
It was special, Jimmy. Anyway, we finished second in the league to Manchester United, and then I'd also played another 2 times for England against Wales. What else did I play against? I played against Wales, and I played against France, and I played against Belgium and Wales. So I got left out of the team for the World Cup squad, and being quite a sensitive guy with no advisors, attorneys, or whatever they all have today. They all have a team of people working behind the scenes for the beneficiary or the good forward thinking for the players. So I cheered for England to win the World Cup because I knew it would be good for the nation, which it really was. But I was so sad that I was not involved. I felt, see, what happened is Alf Ramsey did not like wingers, mainly because a lot of wingers like me used to play against him, and he was a good player, no question, but he was slow. So he couldn't handle players like me. So we wonder whether he didn't like wingers because he didn't like playing against them. But you can't criticize. They went to a very strict 4-4-2 system when they're defending, and I wasn't very good defending. Maybe that hurt me. But I think my form was affected by that. And then Johnny Carey came to my house. Well, first of all, I had an incredible meeting with Peter Taylor, who was the brains of Derby County in terms of bringing in talent. I used to play on his cricket team, Nottingham Taxis, and well, Peter played on that team as well. So one night Peter met with me and he said, we're gonna sign a centre half, we're gonna sign a centre forward, then we're coming in for you. And I was thrilled to be tapped up, in effect. So I went on doing my job and trying to not talk about this meeting because I had to keep it quiet. So Derby County signed Roy McFarland. Then they signed John O'Hare for very little money. And then that made me happy that Peter and Derby County's plan was working out the way they told me. So he comes in for me. I think they bid £30,000. I think they gave me £1,000. So the fee probably was £29,000. And I signed for Derby. But gentleman John Cory came to our house and he says, "You don't have to go. You can stay with me if you want to." But I was so blown away with the enthusiasm and the direction that Derby County was going under Clough and Taylor. So I went there and, it was a wonderful move. We stayed in Nottingham in our lovely house in Ruddington. We had 2 children in Ruddington, Nottingham. And then once everything settled down, and it wasn't an easy beginning at Derby, because Clough was trying to push and provoke and goad you, and I didn't like all that stuff. But in the end, I bought off on what they wanted to do, and everything went honky-dory. So we eventually, about a year later, we actually moved into a beautiful village called Ockbrook. And in the village lived Alan Durban and his family, and John O'Hare and his great family. And, I was there for 10 years at Derby. It was a wonderful time.
That's what I wanted to talk to you about next is we recently spoke to Alan Durban, and he told us about when O'Hare, McFarland, and yourself were signed, that he just knew when you guys came into training that this team was going to be on the rise and do something special because the level and the ability that you guys brought elevated the entire squad. First of all, talk to me about Alan Durban and what a wonderful player he was. And second, at what point did it click for you that you knew that you'd made the right decision to sign for Derby and that this team was going to go off and do something special?
Well, first of all, Alan Durban, I'll bet you had a great interview with him. He's really a very educated man. He was a wonderful player. He's a wonderful person. He's like me. We're getting older. But Alan is still active. I think he plays tennis. He can hardly walk, but he plays tennis and golf.
He definitely beat me in a tennis court. That's for sure.
No, he's the way he talks about Derby County is really special. Don't forget he played in front of Ronnie Webster on the right side of midfield. Now I was on the left side, but there was me, there was Archie Gamble, and there was David Nish. And before then, John Robson. So in effect, on the left side, we had 3 people. On the right side, we only had 2 people, which was Alan Durban and Ronnie Webster. But Ronnie Webster, I think he could have tackled 5 people. He was an unsung hero, played more games for Derby County than any other, I think. But Alan Durban had this wonderful brain. And I knew when I had this ability to really delay the cross, which means all the defenders are coming over towards me. But Alan used to sneak around the back or come in very late. And I often used to find him in fluid play. I'd get the ball to the byline and he'd come in, and John O'Hare and Kevin Hector had come in for the first attempt. And Alan Durban had come in at the back. And he scored many, many goals. Alan Durban was a very, very intelligent player. And of course, went on to be a very good manager and did a great service for the game. I'm sure he's still scouting for somebody. He's still active, but we talk occasionally, and he's made a remarkable quote about me in my book. And what did he say? He said, he said I was a better two-footed player than David Beckham, which is a compliment. And he also said that he still, to this day, doesn't know which was my strongest foot. Now, that goes back to the brick wall at Wednesbury and the dungeons behind the goal at the Molyneux at Wolves. And Wolves players always two-footed. And I tell young parents today who've got a kid who plays soccer, particularly the little ones, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, maybe a little bit younger, bribe your kids and give them a piece of candy, chocolate, to kick with that other foot. It works every time. So I guess finishing up on Alan Durban, he's a great friend. We speak often on email or text or Twitter, and but there was a lot of great players there.
So walk me through. You go from the second division, and within 2 years, you're league champions.
I think we're stuck.
Yeah, no, it happens. It's technology. It's 2021. This stuff happens now. So walk me through.
Yeah.
You come through. You start in the second division, and within 2 years, you're league champions. A little bit. I wouldn't say a meteoric rise, but it was a quick rise nonetheless. And one of the main influences that you've touched on it very briefly is Brian Clough and Peter Taylor. What was it like to work under Brian Clough? What was the man like? We hear the stories, we read the things, and we see the movies about him. What was he like from your perspective to work with and as a man?
I think he was driven because he was so annoyed that he had to stop playing early. Because he was a top player, he was a striker, which meant he was very selfish. And as a manager, he and Peter Taylor used to play the good cop, bad cop role. And Clough went down the path with me of hammering me, which I wasn't used to. And then he changed his tune. And I'm sure Peter Taylor was behind it because I really like Peter as a man, and he was a big fan of mine. Clough was a fan of mine, but he didn't show it as much as Peter did. But in the end, Clough used to tell the players, get the bloody ball out to Alan, get him on the flipping wing, he knows how to play. And I'm sure the players were going, oh, here we go with the old bullshit, but it certainly worked on me, and I loved a pat on the back. My dad once told Stanley Collis to give me a pat on the back, and you know, and he'll play for England one day. And but that never happened at Wolves. But Clough eventually, I think it took me about a year to understand him. And of course, they were bringing in players. I remember bringing in Colin Todd, who was a great player. Looked like a good player, was a great player, beautiful physique, played easy, fast. He smacked the ball from central. 74, 75. Bruce Rioch, Peter Daniel was another story. I mean, Peter Daniel came in to replace Roy McFarlane, who had a terrible injury. And, you know, Peter was not kept together by Colin Todd, but Bruce Rioch as well. And the funny thing about Peter was the crowd once sang it many times with Daniel for England, and it was a wonderful time at the club. And the contrast between Mackay and Clough was quite alarming. Mackay didn't get stuck into the players like Clough did, or Taylor did. But Dave Mackay used to love to play five-a-sides. And Dave Mackay thought winning was easy. And, you know, I think there's a terrible feeling all these years later in my stomach about the way the board of directors handled the both Clough Taylor deal and Mackay Anderson Henderson deal, it was they must have thought about their own egos rather than what the fans wanted. You know, Sam Longson used to get in trouble Sam Longson wanted to be chairman of the FA committee. And when they put him under pressure to tell him, telling them to keep their manager quiet, like Brian Clough was on TV every week. Well, he was the beneficiary of all these meetings on TV and the humour that Clough brought. It was the club, it was the fans. We were getting 40,000 a game. And instead of Sam Longson laughing at them and saying, hey, I'm doing great. We've got more season ticket holders than we've ever had. We've got more publicity. We're on the television all the time. I'm sorry you're not doing so well, Mr. Members, but I'm doing great. And laughing at them, but he didn't. He let them push him around. And in the end, what happened is we played at Manchester United, Theatre of Dreams in, I think it was January of '73. We won 1-0. Kevin Hector scored the goal. We're sitting on the bus after the game. We knew that Clough and Taylor were probably hobnobbing with Sir Matt Busby and enjoying the fact that we'd won there, and it was always incredible to win at Manchester United. Manchester United? And on the bus, Pete Taylor comes on and he's furious. And I was close to Peter Taylor and he told me himself what happened. He said, Alan, I'm in the boardroom. We're so happy with all the work we put in. We signed the players. We win at Manchester United. Jack Kirkland, who was a hard-hitting businessman, had joined the board. Clearly knew nothing about soccer. He apparently had been to Peter Taylor after the game in the boardroom and said, can we meet on Monday, Peter? And I would like you to explain to me what you do for Derby County Football Club. Well, first of all, that is absurd that he spoke to him that way. And Peter, being sensitive, he reacted really badly to that. So all of a sudden, we have a nice Sunday, enjoying the on the goodness. All of a sudden, Clough and Taylor had resigned. That's my daughter's dog. So Clough and Taylor resigned. Roy McFarlane called me. We had a players' meeting, and I actually wrote the resignation letter. And every player signed it, and we said, we insist on our being resigned, not thinking in 100 years the board of directors could possibly accept it because of the love affair going on between the whole town and the players and the club and the fans. It was paradise. So they accepted their resignation. So we got together as a team and we said, we will not play in the next game unless you reinstate Clough and Taylor. In fact, we went further than that. We were going to go to Mallorca, to the place, Calamajor, where we used to go once or twice a year with Clough and Taylor, and not play on the Saturday against Leicester. Every player signed a letter. The letter just sold for about £6,000, and where's mine? I mean, I wrote the damn thing. So anyway, I think Gerald Mortimer, the lovely old Derby County journalist for the Derby Telegraph, I think he kept a lot of stuff, and I think when he died, I think that letter was part of the stuff he kept. So good luck to him. So Roy McFarlane gets a call from Cliff Lloyd, who was the chairman of the PFA, Professional Footballers Association, saying, Roy, if the team doesn't show up on Saturday for the game against Leicester, there's a possibility that you might get banned, all of you, banned for life. Of course, that was tough. So of course we had to play. Jimmy Gordon, who was the trainer, ran the practices, which were pretty light-hearted. We played on the Saturday against Leicester. The great Peter Shilton was in goal for Leicester. All of a sudden in the game, there's some cheering going on when there's nothing happening on the field. And we turned around, it was Brian Clough had found a way into the director's box, into the side of the director's box in the next part of the stands, and he got his arms up, facing the fans on the pop side. And they were cheering crazy. Now, Sam Longson, he thought they were cheering for him, so he gets up with his arms in there, and they booed him. And so what happened toward the end of the game, I went down the right wing, and I sort of crossed the ball along the 6-yard line, between the 6-yard line and the penalty spot. In comes my old faithful Kevin Hector at the far post, scores the winning goal against the great Peter Shilton. I didn't know whether to celebrate or what. I didn't know. And it was a funny feeling. But then the next thing is the great Stuart Webb got involved. Now, Stuart Webb, who was the general manager, secretary of the club, looking back, did an amazing job. Stuart was in the middle of the fans, the directors, and the players, and the media. And I have to tell you, his professionalism and his know-how really sorted it all out. Because when all of a sudden, when Clough and Taylor had resigned, there was no going back. Obviously, the board had made it very clear to Stuart that there was not a possibility. Stuart realized that Dave Mackay was extremely popular as a player and as a personality and as a winner with most of the team, McFarlane, O'Hare, Hector, me. So Stuart went and got Dave Mackay. Roy McFarland, who was helped big time by Dave when Dave first came to Derby as a player, when Roy was a boy at the back, and teaching him the game and everything and teaching him how to be a winner. Roy actually called Dave and said, "Don't take the job, Dave." But Dave took a position. Anyway, Dave was appointed. On the Monday morning, at the first meeting with Dave and Des Anderson, Dave was brilliant. He said, "Gentlemen, I played with you. I had a good time with you. Let me tell you something right now. I would be sick to my stomach if I picked up the newspaper and somebody else had got the job that I've been offered. So let's have some fun." And by the way, Clough and Taylor did resign, and his speech was brilliant, and we all loved Dave. And after this, a very tricky beginning, even Dave went on, not even Dave, the wonderful Dave went on, and we won the championship again in 75, I think it was. And then they got treated very badly by the board of directors, which in effect, the directors made very bad decisions, anti-fans decisions, on 2 occasions. And the people that remember those days wonder what would have happened if Clough and Taylor would have stayed, which they should have done. If they'd have stayed, they would have got Nigel Clough and Archie Gamble's son, and Colin Todd's son was a decent player. So I have to blame the directors, and thank God we had Stuart Webb, who really found a way out to make it happen. But of course, you know, the club today is struggling, and it's sad to see.
Which league title was more enjoyable for you to win? Was it the first one or was it the second one? Which one did you have more fun in the season, and which one was more meaningful to you?
Well, I played much more in the Clough Taylor season. I was the leading goal scorer, so that obviously meant a lot to me. You know what meant a lot to us all? The 1969, when we won the Division 2 championship by a mile. That meant a lot because it was the first championship we'd won in many ways. And but clearly the Clough Taylor for me was the best. Under Dave Mackay, I didn't play that much, even though I was very disappointed and upset quietly. But I liked Dave and I couldn't take him on. But I did get my chance at a very vital time. I think Francis Lee was injured, who was a great player. I went in for 8 straight games around about Easter when the team was needing a different look, if you like. And we won 6 and tied 1. And I felt that I made a big difference and fresh legs to a team that was at the crucial point of that season. So I felt very much involved with the season. I really liked Dave and Des. I should have knocked on his door a few times and said, "Come on, Dave, I'm ready to play." But you know, I contributed nicely, but you know, winning the equivalent of the Premier League 2 times in the early 70s for the Derby County fans is a very, very special experience. And thanks to YouTube, you can see a lot of the highlights. I love YouTube, and if I'm feeling a bit down, any time I stick my name in on YouTube, and I just love some of those old goals, and I'm sure a lot of the fans do that. And so being at Derby County was a real wonderful experience.
I've certainly watched a lot of those YouTube videos, Alan. I think I've probably watched all of them. And a couple games that stick out in my mind, and this leads me to my next point, is the European Cup, right? It's Champions League now and everything, but the European Cup has so much romance and nostalgia about it with that era. And you guys played some really top teams. You played Benfica, and you had Eusebio was in that side. You went and took Real Madrid to the sword, who at the time were dominant in European competition, laden with Spanish internationals. But I want to talk about the Juventus semifinal, because in the first leg you went to Turin. I remember Alan Durban said that John Charles came with you guys, and he thought that the match was a little fishy, to say the least, because Haller had gone into the referee's dressing room, and I wanted to get your perspective on that Juventus semifinal.
I've seen Clough and Taylor lose their tempers, but this was like a knife sticking in their heart. What happened on the field that day at Juventus was crazy. You know, we have a German referee. We have the German referee giving a yellow card to Archie Gamble and Roy McFarland in the early stages of the game for nothing, very, very little, because they couldn't play in the second leg at Derby if they had a yellow card. So that was the first order of business, which was weird. At halftime, Peter Taylor happened to see Helmut Haller, the German midfield player, walking off the field with the German referee and obviously speaking German. So Peter Taylor got in the middle of it. One of the security people at the stadium grabbed hold of Peter, took him into a room, like semi-security room, I suppose. Fortunately, the fact that Clough and Taylor had suspected something not being right, they'd invited John Charles, the great Welsh international and former Juventus superstar, was invited on our trip. So he gets in the middle of it, and Peter Taylor is allowed to watch the second half from the bench. At the post-game press interview, Clough, he wouldn't speak to the press. He said, I don't want to talk about the cheating bastards. That's what he said. And he believed that, and he took that to his deathbed many years later. But then the second leg was at Derby. We were down 3-1, which means if we win 2-0, we go through on the goals away difference. The game was going pretty well. It was 0-0. We got a penalty. Probably wouldn't have been given if the German referee would have refereed that game as well. But anyway, I played in the game. I really shouldn't have played, but Clough had promoted me in the press as the secret weapon because I hadn't played in the first leg. And when a powerful Brian Clough puts you under pressure, you do as you're told. And I really should have said, I'm not fit to go. Anyway, we get the penalty kick. I know I was facing the great Dino Zarp. It didn't bother me at all. I was confident. I'd scored many goals into that goal. And for one reason or another, I tried to hit it in to the left of the goalie in the upper V. I wasn't nervous, and it just missed the post. It didn't curl like I thought it would. Anyway, we did lose. Well, we actually tied the game, and Juventus went through, but that still leaves a very nasty taste in my mind, because I think if we could have got by the Juventus game, I think we would have won it. But then, of course, Clough and Taylor went on to Forest and had a most remarkable career, and they really should have had that at Derby. If it hadn't been for the directors being amateurs, if you like, and I call them amateurs, and they're not bad people, but they didn't know. Can you imagine what Clough and Taylor would have done in today's game if they'd have had billionaire owners? I don't think they'd ever lose a game. But
are you certain that if Cloughie had stayed, Derby would have eventually won the European Cup?
I'm sure, because first of all, the great players that Taylor found, like Kenny Burns, Trevor Francis, Peter Shilton, so there's many more. I mean, look at what they did with John Robertson. They did an Alan Hinton on John Robertson.
That's what I wanted to discuss with you. My dad wanted me to ask you this, because he said that John Robertson's the only player since he's been watching football his entire life that can come anywhere close to the way Alan Hinton was playing.
That's a great compliment for me.
Who was a better winger, Alan? Was it yourself or was it John Robertson?
I think he's got more trophies than me, so I think that answers the question itself. But no, I remember a few years ago I had lunch with Ian Storey-Moore, who was a very good player, John O'Hare, top man, and John Robertson. The four of us had lunch in West Bridgeford, Nottingham. And I remember when we were leaving the room, we had a wonderful couple of hours laughing, telling stories. Should have been recorded, the whole conversation. And I put my arm around John Robertson as I left, and I said, you know, John, you were a marvelous player. You really were, and I admired you greatly. You know what he said? You were pretty good yourself too, coach. And but John Robertson, his story, I actually detailed it in my book as to how they got under John Robertson's skin from the beginning. And the middleman there that sorted it out was John O'Hare, who happened to be John Robertson's roommate on the road. And they really tried to wind John Robertson up because he was overweight, he was smoking, he was going nowhere with his career, and they tried to unload on him in a typical manner. And John O'Hare was able to say to John Robertson, who was very disturbed by the outburst against him, give him a chance. They're doing this to you because they think you can be a good player for them, so give him a chance. And I think, you know, John O'Hare and certainly John McGovern who was also at Forest, and it was bought to Derby by Peter Taylor and Brian Clough for £7,000 English. I mean, what a career John McGovern had. And I do enjoy John's enthusiasm for Forest and Derby and the Clough and Taylor era. I mean, don't forget John McGovern and John O'Hare. They not only played for Clough and Taylor at Derby, they played for them at Leeds, which was a story on its own. The club time at Leeds, at least he finished up with a lot of money as severance pay. But and then of course at Forest, and there's no question in my mind, as much as Dave Mackay did. Dave Mackay got treated badly by the board of directors. You know, things were changing. The board of directors used to worry if we overspent more money on the road on hotel meals. And it was a different world then. I mean, most of the guys on the board were successful in their own way, but small time compared with the Abramoviches and the Manchester City owner, and of course the wealthy Manchester United owners and the Leicester City owner. It's a totally different world, and of course it's a different world for the athletes, because you know the athletes get paid a lot of money today, and I'm happy about that. And of course, the way that managers now, coaches talk to their players is Clough and Taylor would be successful today, but they would certainly have to change their rhetoric in terms of slaughtering players at times. Because in my day, if they had a go at you and insulted you, you'd say, okay, I'll show you, and you'd go and do the job just to prove them wrong. And they knew that. Today's a different world. I mean, I know a story about one player was taken off the field at half time, and the manager said, I'm taking you off because you're not playing very well. And the player turned around and said, that's okay, I'll never play another game for you. And then he went to his agent and he got moved to another club and made more money. So it's a player's game today. And as long as the game doesn't forget the great fans, I'm happy for the players.
I 100% agree with you. And I want to talk about the game today as well. But before we touch on that, one of the things I've come to learn about with Brian Clough was he didn't like people who, he didn't like beards. He didn't like long hair. He didn't like people kind of, I guess, not being extroverts, but he liked them to kind of conform to a certain way. So that leads me to my question is, white boots in the 70s, Alan, what's going on with that?
I think, what happened with the white boots is I got approached by Hummel, and they offered me £1,000 to wear the white boots. Now, don't forget, I was making probably £110 a week at the time. So to be given a £1,000 check up front, you could buy a house for £3,000-4,000, maybe less in those days. And that was a lot of money. And of course, I didn't think it would do me any harm as a person wearing white boots. I tried them on and they were okay. So I wore the boots. I am convinced, though, that Clough, knowing how sensitive I was, he got to know me pretty well. I'm convinced he told the players, leave him alone. Don't taking the mickey out of the white boots because we don't want to lose his good play. And I'm convinced that happened. I'll have to ask McFarland or Roger Davis or Alan Durban or John O'Hare next time I see them. But I'm pretty convinced something went on behind the scenes. But, at the end of the day, I think I had a good period of time with those white boots, and they certainly didn't do me any harm. And Yeah, I had a really good run.
Do you still have a pair? Do you still have a pair of them today?
I have a pair in my bedroom. In fact, if I'd known, I should have brought them with me. I had bladder cancer just over 6 years ago, and I remember I knew the operation was going to be for almost 8 hours, and the night before I was pretty uncomfortable, and I'm lying in bed. I couldn't sleep, and I looked up, and there's my white boots on the cabinet there. You know what I did? I signed them. And I signed them because I'm thinking maybe I won't come out of the anesthetic or the surgery. And they're still there, brand new pair of formal white boots. I don't know what I'll do with them. One of these days, I think my grandson wants them, but I'm very proud of them. And I was very pleased to get, I got criticized and laughed at sometimes when I was on the wing. On the opposing people's grounds. It didn't bother me. In fact, if anything, people used to try and kick the hell out of me. But, you know, in reality, the more they kicked me, the more I was determined to do a good job. And I think being kicked around used to motivate me. And I wasn't known as tough, but Peter Taylor said I was tough. Peter Taylor, I had moral courage. And I think I did, looking back and seeing some of those films of me crossing the ball under pressure when fullbacks are trying to kick you. I think I had courage, and I wasn't as bad defensively as we make out to be. I think it's become a funny line that I wasn't very good physically, but I really was, and my record speaks for itself. So, all in all, I had a fabulous career at Derby, and you know, what more can I say?
Yeah, and so I want to talk about, first of all, before we talk about your American exploits, are you left or right-footed, Alan?
Well, when I went to Wolves, I was a midfield player. But as I said earlier, I was 139 pounds, which is just short of 10 stone, 5'7". I finished up nearly 5'11", not quite, but almost. And Cullis told me he was going to put me on the wing. He says, because you'll get beat up too much in the midfield. Now, don't forget, in those leagues, the 5th and 6th team at Wolves were, one was in the Birmingham League and one was in the Wolverhampton Works League. And you'd play against old pros and they'd try and kick you. And the boots were strong and ugly in those days. And so they made me into a left winger. Now, originally, I was a right-footed player. But then I started to work on my left foot. And of course, at Wolves, crossing the ball was very much part of their play and their build-up. So I'd be on the field with Terry Wharton and Jerry Mannion and sometimes Jimmy Mullen and sometimes Des Horn. And you'd cross the ball to people like Ted Farmer, who was a wonderful, brave central striker for Wolves, and Jimmy Murray. So it was non-stop, you know. And then when I used to play on the left, no coach ever stopped me going over to the right because they knew I could cross the ball with both feet. And to be honest with you, if I wasn't getting anywhere with the right back, like the best right back I ever played against was Paul Reaney at Leeds. He was a wonderful player, but he wouldn't talk to me, and I didn't like that. I like to have a bit of a conversation with people, especially the ones that were trying to kick me. But so if I was playing against Paul, sometimes I'd go on the right wing to get away from him, and that was always a plus for me. You know, plus I noticed today in the game that I used to pull the trigger fairly quickly, shooting at the goal. Modern day players, I watch the games and I go, shoot. And they always want to have an extra touch and shoot, and they all want to curl it. And curling's for the very few, like Ronaldo, not Ronaldo, Messi, and Mohamed Salah, who I think is a wonderful player, and but some of these players try and do what they do, and they should just hammer the crap out of the ball.
The old Hinton hammer, eh?
Oh, that's what they said once on the television.
Because I was watching some videos of you, Alan, in preparation for this, and just generally. And your left foot was an absolute wand. And my dad always said you could open a tin of beans with that left foot. You could open a tin of beans, and Alan Hinton's going to hit it. And you could. And then the other side, you've got the Hinton hammer there. So you've kind of got both kind of spectrums. You got the finesse, and then you got the power side as well.
Well, that all happened from the. It's on YouTube. We beat Arsenal 5-0, and I'm very pleased that Bob Wilson, who I really liked and admired from the beginning of his career. Bob Wilson came to Wolves for a short while when we were on the ground stuff, and then all of a sudden he went missing, and he was at Arsenal. He also went to Loughborough College, and I always wanted to go there because I thought that's where the smart people went, and I was not smart. So Bob Wilson's written a foreword in my book, and I appreciated that. But the Arsenal game, we won 5-0. I think it was it Hugh Johns and they said Hinton's hammer, and I think I got one rocket goal, and I got 3 assists in the same game. In fact, in that game, Roger Davis, who was a wonderful player, great young man, still is. He's not a young man anymore, but he has a young heart and a young mind. But Roger Davis scored his first ever goal on one of my crosses. So, and then of course I brought Roger to Seattle and Tulsa, and he did great for me there as well. So, I had a lot of good moments.
And that brings me perfectly segue again, Alan, to your time in America. You, from my understanding, you came to America for as a family decision after the death of your son, to try to just kind of start fresh. And you end up playing in the NASL, which was the precursor to MLS. They it kind of like folded there and then came back. And the NSAL for me was always kind of like, what a wild time, of the NSAL. And you went from the Dallas Tornadoes to the Vancouver Whitecaps. What was it like for you transitioning? Because Dallas is not like Oakbrook. How was it for you to transition as a player, a person, and a family? How was that transition to the States?
Well, we were struggling as a family. I mean, we'd lost our son Matthew. It was everything in our life, and I was running away to the pub, like most people when you're traumatized over the loss of a child at age 9. My career was coming to the end. We'd had business problems, and I got a chance. Al Miller, who was the coach of Dallas, suddenly showed up in our village unannounced, and he knocked on our door, and we met, and we went out for dinner that night, and he convinced my wife and I that we should go to Dallas. So we decided to go to Dallas for 6 months to get out of our beautiful village and the memories of Matthew, and try and rebuild our life, which was going to be tough. So we all went off to Dallas. I thought Jeff Bourne was going to come with me, who had been in Dallas the year before, and we were friends from the Derby days. He suddenly got traded to Crystal Palace, so he wasn't going to be there, so I was in a panic. You know what I did? I went to Brian Clough, and I asked him for a favor. Didn't tell him. You didn't tell Brian anything. You just asked him nicely. And I said to the boss, I said, I'm going to Dallas, boss. And he was at Nottingham Forest. And I said, is there any way you can help me out by letting me have John O'Hare, who knows how I play,
who were very good friends with Val and his kids. And you know what he said? No problem. And now that was Clough, the nice side of Clough. If you asked him nicely, he would do anything for you. And he was a very kind man in many ways. And he got more kind as he got older, and he was kissing people. And of course, I wish he would have quit a year before he did. You know, seeing him with all those blotches on his face was very painful. Is very painful when you see that, because what a wonderful career he had. But Dallas was a great move for us. They put us in a nice apartment. We were picked up by the booster club at the airport, get to the apartment, which was very nice. The fridge was full of food. A couple of weeks later, in comes John O'Hare and Val and his kids. They moved in next door. Swimming pool there. Jimmy Ryan, the Manchester United player, was on the ground floor. What he did with my wife was keep her busy, and Tanya, our daughter, who was then 7, kept her busy. And I have to tell you, Al Miller, and of course with me writing the book, I've talked about it, and I've found out stuff I didn't know, a lot of stuff I didn't know. Al Miller went to Kenny Cooper, the goalkeeper, who was from Blackburn, played a little bit in, I think it was Blackburn Reserves, was the goalkeeper. And Al Miller went to Kenny Cooper and he said, I've got this guy, he's 35, there's still some gas in the tank, so I'm told. Would you share a room with him and take care of him, because he's really, really hurting, and try and make him smile? And that's exactly what happened. Kenny Cooper was wonderful for me. Everybody loved him. But Al Miller really performed miracles for me and my family, and we're still in touch. And so Dallas, we were supposed to be there for 6 months. I then went to the Whitecaps, came back to England. I went to the Whitecaps, and as assistant coach under Tony Waiters, the great Tony Waiters, who actually, we just lost Tony about a year ago. He was a great man. He used to let me move on and get things sorted. He supported almost every move I wanted to make. He was a wonderful human being, and so he wanted to sign Gordon Taylor, who went on to make, well, I think he's still the head of the PFA, Professional Footballers Association, making a few million a year. I met him a couple of years ago at the Dorchester for the manager's annual meeting, and I made him laugh, and I said, hey, Gordon, I don't know whether you know this, but the reason you didn't go back to the Whitecaps in '78 was because of me. Because I told Tony Waiters I was better than you. And he started laughing. And of course, it was an interesting time. But I played for the Whitecaps in '78, and I played, and I didn't go to play. And I got 30 assists that year, which has never been broken, never will, I don't think. 30 assists in 1 year. And but don't forget, I had Kevin Hector and John Samuels and Stevie Kember and Peter Daniels and John Craven and Bobby Lenarduzzi and Gary Ayre and Big Bobby Campbell and Phil Parks, the old Wolf player in goal. So I was really, and Vancouver's a great city, and I loved my time there. And then I got offered the head coaching job at the Tulsa Roughnecks for the '79 season. I went there thinking it was a very solid club, but it was a challenge. I did bring Roger Davis and David Nish and Alan Woodward, Terry Dadicott, Sammy Chapman, Donald O'Riordan was already there, Colin Bolton. So it was home from home for me in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had a great year. our final game was in New York in the semi-final of the playoffs, and I think there was 70,000 fans there, which is amazing. That was more than some of the teams in those days had in a year. But
how did you find the traveling, because the teams were so geographically dispersed, and me and you are on two opposite sides of the coast in the same country, and we've got a 3-hour time difference. How did you find the travel and the logistics of how it all worked compared to how you were playing in England?
Well, it's very different. I mean, first of all, I didn't come to America because I enjoyed being on an airplane. I hated flying. I'm not a great flyer now, but I was desperate. So flying from Dallas to New York is about 2.5 hours. Flying from Dallas to Seattle is about 3 hours. So that's well positioned, Dallas, in terms of flying around America. But today, Major League Soccer, they have so many chartered airplanes. It's a different world. So sometimes we fly from Seattle to New York on a Friday. We sometimes get there about 9 o'clock at night to play the next day in Giant Stadium in front of 40, 50,000, which they had for regular season games at the time because they had Pele and everybody and Beckenbauer. And I'd take the players into the bar. I'd buy them a couple of beers. That was as much as they could have. Maybe they had more. I don't think so. But I used to think it might help them sleep a little bit better. But then Clough and Taylor used to do that. So a lot of the lessons I learned under Clough and Taylor and Mackay and Anderson and Johnny Carey and Stanley Cullis have really helped me have a successful career in coaching. And I'm very pleased that, I learned salesmanship and showmanship off Cloughie. And I've always reached out to the fans. My teams have always played exciting soccer. And, I've been in Seattle now for 41 years. And I'm well known here. I played all-man soccer for 25 years here in the GSSL, which is a great league. And I have an immense number of friends. I'm very proud of the coach. Brian Smetzer, I call him Sir Brian because he deserves that. Having won 2 NASL championships in the last 4 years. They play good soccer, and the Sounders are a big club. And I know I did my part in the beginning, and I'm looking for them to continue to be a top team for many years to come.
So if I show up, Alan, to, let's say you're coaching, and I show up and I've got my shin pads and my socks all up and I'm in my kit and everything, what type of manager is Alan Hinton, and what's it like to work under him if I'm a player?
I think I make the players smile. I think I make them feel important. I try to put them in their best position. Sometimes it might not be the position they think. I'll often buy them a round of drinks after the game if they've done a good job. The locker room is always lively. The coaches don't get changed in the same locker room as the players. We have our own room. But I try and get them to think like Dave Mackay did, that winning is not difficult. And I try and motivate them. Sometimes, if you know a player is a really, really solid character, you might, like Steve Daly, for instance, one night we're playing the New York Cosmos in the Kingdom, probably 30,000, 40,000 people there. And Steve Daly was a good player, but I went to him this one time and I said, Steve, I'm not sure about you. This is the week before the game. I'm not sure about you. And he said, well, you don't think I can play? I said, I don't know yet. And I'd walk past him. I wouldn't have a meeting in my office and a cup of tea and everything. And I'd just mess with him. And have a guess who was the best player on the field? Steve Daly. Because I learned all those tricks from seeing it work during my 20 years as a player, maybe 22 years as a player. and I'm a real people's person, and I like to motivate them and tell them the fans need to be entertained. And, 90% of my career as coaching was fun. I had some issues with ownership, who clearly was short of money, and that was tough. I've had players who were not paid for weeks, and I backed the players. I'd call my own mate Tony Waiters and say, I've got some players who are owed money. And he told me once, he said, get them the money, because if you don't, nobody will ever play for you again. And that's the kind of network of people, I've had around me. So I'm rambling here, but I do think signing the right players, making them feel important, putting them in the right position, getting the best people on the corner kicks and free kicks, getting the defensive qualities right. Because if you defend right, you're gonna stop the team scoring, then you're gonna go ahead and score goals. So I'm a great believer in entertaining soccer, and I've always wanted a winger. And for me, the winger, if a winger plays well, you're going to win most of the time. And so
I always tended, Alan, to try to be a winger. But I think if you were coaching me, I think you'd probably find that my best position is left back on the bench, or left back in the dressing room, or kit man, or even water boy would probably be my best position.
You're being pretty modest now.
One more NSAL question before I want to talk about MLS. Playing against players like Pele and Beckenbauer and Johan Cruyff, you'd played against some amazing players in Europe. Obviously, Eusebio, the great players at Derby, and within the European Cups. Well, what was it like to play against those kind of players? Yes, they were in the twilights of their careers, but you're still playing these world-renowned legends of the game. What was it like to play against them?
I think it was a thrill meeting them. I met Pele a couple of times, and I have a wonderful photograph of him and I, which will be in my book. And Pele, Beckenbauer, Canalia, Trevor Francis, many, Bobby Moore, Jeff Hurst, Willie Johnson, all came to play in the North American Soccer League. And at the time, North American Soccer League was a wonderful league. But obviously, eventually it failed. It failed because the Cosmos pulled the plug. 84 was the last year. And then I was lucky enough to do a lot of work in youth soccer. And I got involved with a good bunch of young players. It was really a big deal for them to be on my team, and we finished up winning many state championships, and many of these young kids went to the big schools to play soccer and get an education. So coaching youth soccer is a very special situation, because you're really not just teaching them to play soccer, having selected them, and I have a good eye for talent, but you're doing the parents a huge favor or service. You're keeping the kids busy in a meaningful manner. If there's anything wrong with a kid, the coach can probably tell before the parents. So I think all the coaches out there that are coaching, particularly young people, deserve an enormous amount of credit for what they give to the game and to the families. And I've been very much involved with all of that. So, what do you do?
And seeing the development of the game, Alan, when you came to the NSAL, and when you look back at that time, and then you look back now at what MLS has become. MLS has just passed its 25th season. It's its 26th year. How have you seen the game develop in this country? And did you think when you first signed for Dallas that it would be what it is today?
I think I'm very pleased. The fact that Major League Soccer is, I would have to say it's doing well. Can it do better? Yes. Has this pandemic upset the finances of a lot of clubs? Absolutely. I hope all the clubs get huge money off the television contracts. I'm not sure they do. I don't know that information, but I do know that there's some really good players coming through, American players now. I think most clubs like the Sounders have an academy that is well financed and providing education for the players as well as proper opportunities to play. The Sounders, for instance, they've got several homegrown players. I'm not sure about the homegrown meaning that 100% homegrown, because it doesn't. For instance, Jordan Morris at the Sounders, who's actually out with the ACL.
That he tore when he was on loan at Swansea earlier this season.
I mean, looking back, I know it sounded like the right thing to do to send him to Coventry, to Swansea. I'm not sure he shouldn't have gone to a bigger club than that. I don't know what the financial arrangement was. I still don't know what the financial arrangements are now that he's injured now for a year. Is Swansea paying his wages or the Sounders or insurance? I don't know that, but I mean, that's not my business. But Jordan Morris, he learned his soccer playing for Eastside FC, that incidentally is run by one of my former players, Chance Fry. Bernie James, who runs Crossfire, which is the club I founded many years ago. He's the one who coached DeAndre Yedlin, who
Newcastle, and he went. I think he's at Galatasaray now in Turkey.
That's exactly right. But I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back to play here again. Then you've got the Roldan brothers. Christian's a wonderful player. You know, I've watched him play. Christian Roldan, he can play defensive midfield. I like him better when he's pushing forward, because he's got a good eye for the bounce of the ball and where the ball's going to come or deflected. And he runs all day. And his brother Alex Roldan, I had the pleasure of going on the charter plane to the final championship game in Toronto a few years ago, and I sat by Roldan's parents. What a wonderful family. They have three boys. They're from Guatemala. Christian went to the University of Washington under a very, very good coach, Clark, his name, I forget, I know his father. Anyway, and the other boy, they raised three boys, the Roldans, and the other boy is, I think he's a fitness expert at the LA Galaxy. So the Roldan brothers are really, really special. There's other players coming through. I know he's Kellen Rowe, who's come back to the city where he was born to play for the Sounders. A very good move. I actually coached Kellen one time when he was playing for Crossfire and Bernie James. Good player, very confident. And Richie, Spencer Ritchie's come back. He's a goalie from the university. He's come back to the Sounders. And I think all these players coming back here, this is a great city to live. And at the end of their career, like I just had a conversation with Andy Rose, who played here. He's an English kid, and he's playing for the Whitecaps. And Andy was like me. He's lucky enough to have played in the great city of Seattle and the great city of Vancouver, BC. So, you know, this is our home now. We've been here 41 years, and I like what the club is doing. The fans here are special. The coach is the best in the league, the best in the country, Brian Smetzer. He has a who's who of assistant coaches. One's Preki, who I coached at the Tacoma Stars.
I remember him. He used to be at Kansas City Wizards, Preki.
That's right. He was. I adopted him at the Tacoma Stars, and then he went off to Portugal to play for Estrela Amadora. I went over there when we got the Stars going again with new ownership, and I paid $105,000 for him. And he's back here. He's a wonderful assistant coach. Jimmy Traore has a Championship League medal playing for Liverpool. He's a lovely, genuine, thoughtful coach. And then they have a Mexican international named Pineda. But they've also got the best goalkeeper coach in the league, Tommy Dutra. So, you know, the Sounders, they've got a very powerful club and very powerful group of fans. So I think we're all looking forward to when the stadium can be full again. And in the meantime, I'm very happy when I'm out and about. I'm not out and about as much as I'd like. I always bump into the fans and we talk about the club and where it's come from. And I'm very friendly with a lot of the old guys who built the Sounders years ago and through the GSSL and the Old Man's League. There's never a dull moment.
Yeah, I mean, Seattle, when you think about it in MLS terms, I mean, when you look at the fan base that the Sounders have, comparatively, like, yeah, I think they're probably some of the best, if not the best, and especially that Pacific Northwest region, when you have Portland, Vancouver, and Seattle up there, those are three diehard fan bases. And then you think about like the support that that Atlanta United have had, but they don't obviously have the history of the Sounders. And I know the Sounders have reformed in MLS, but like you said, the Sounders have been around a lot longer than just their MLS kind of equivalent. So they have that longer fan base. And I know, you know, MLS is growing, which brings me to my next question, Alan. If you could be MLS commissioner for the day, what's the one thing that you would do to push MLS to the next level?
I would insist on doing what could have been done in the old days. I would insist on 3, 4, 5 North Americans being in the starting lineup at all times. I think the league's ready for that. Not necessarily to go to 5 right away, but I think if they started off by insisting on 2 or 3, I think some clubs, 3, 4, some clubs meet that criteria now, but I think, a lot of American players who are good enough to play in Major League Soccer go up to Europe. And I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem with the average players going up to Europe when even the agents know they've got no chance, but it's a money game.
And they go to not like very strange, the Norway League or the Finnish league, or
the representative will make the money.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. I can't, for me as an American who likes American football, I like Christian Pulisic and Gio Reyna and seeing Yunus Musa play at the top levels in the best leagues. That's fantastic. But then when you see the second tier kind of players that are kind of knocking on the door of the national team, and then they go to like the random Swedish second division, you're like, you might as well just be playing for Houston Dynamo. It's
pretty much the same level. You look at the roster and the amount of the number of times. I mean, there's got to be 5, 6, or 7 players now that can play in the American national team. And I like Berhalter. I think he's a good guy. I've told him that. I've met him a couple of times over the years. But there's got to be 5 or 6 or even 7 that are guaranteed starters. The offense is getting a bit crowded. Pulisic, one day you love him, and then another day you'll think, I'm not sure, he's got somewhere, and then the coach keeps bringing him in and leaving him out, and Tuchel, whatever his name is, and I'm getting to like him a little bit more. But Pulisic, I really enjoy watching him play. And of course, we all like watching him play when he does well because he's very confident. but I hope one day Major League Soccer becomes big enough and strong enough to say, it's almost like at the Sounders when Obafemi Martins,
Yeah. Yes.
when he went to meet with the coach, Ziggy Smith, who we lost just over a year ago, maybe two now. Wonderful friend of mine. Ziggy was the coach, and Obafemi Martins went to him in pre-season and said, my heart is in China. And they let him go. Well, I would have said, yeah, but your contract is here. But the league isn't strong enough to do that right now.
Yeah,
So
I think
for all over the world, the players seem to be having the upper hand when it comes to, it's like Harry Kane right now. What's going on with him?
Yeah, and I think for me, if I look at MLS, I think two things is one, when a transfer fee is paid, that money goes to the league and the collective rather than the individual club, which kind of is kind of like, that's weird if DC United have paid or Seattle Sounders have paid money to develop this youth player through the system, and then they sell him for 5 or 10 million and MLS benefit, which under the single entity system. And I think the next step for me in MLS growth is to see players in their prime come, starting to age a little younger and saying, you know what, I'm 27, I'm 28 now. I've played my time in Europe, and I think now's the opportunity to come to MLS. And when they start trending a little younger with the European players coming over, I think that's really gonna really step in. And Alan, I've got two more things I want to discuss, two different kind of topics. You've mentioned it a couple times. Tell me about your book, Triumph and Tragedy. It's available now, isn't it?
It's available in about 2 weeks. It's being printed now in the UK. So in the UK, you can actually get it at GP Books. G for George, P for Peter, Books. GP Books at hotmail.co.uk. And it's very efficient. They're taking care of orders, and we're finding a way now to get all these books signed, and it's a good situation. In the UK, in America, it's quite difficult dealing with sports shops right now because many sports shops have closed. Many sports shops are on the verge of going out of business. Many bookstores are closing. So I'm basically handling it myself with my daughter. So if anybody in the US wants to order a book, email me. And my name is Hinton. That's Hinton Alan, Hinton Hinton Alan, ALAN, at live.com. And I'm on Twitter as well. So, it's at Hinton11. So, it's a good read. The reason it's called Triumph and Tragedies is because the tragedy of losing our son. That was the toughest part of the book. It's 310 pages, which is a big, strong, hard book, hardcover. 60 photographs. My ghostwriter is the great Charles Bamforth, who's an expert on beer, believe it or not. But he loves the Wolves, and we've covered the Wolves extensively, Derby, Forest, North American Soccer League, Sounders obviously a lot. Vancouver, I'm getting orders out of Canada now from different people, and quite a few groups are buying quite a lot to give to their friends, and it's a good time to give somebody a present, and so I'm very thrilled to. It's done now. It's not easy reliving your life. It's been stressful for the family, but it's done now, and it's being printed as we speak.
What motivated you? What pushed you to do a book?
I think I bought Roy McFarlane's book. I've read lots of Cloughie books. I've read Alex Ferguson's books, and I don't think soccer in Seattle has ever had a significant book written. I just thought it was something to do. I attempted it once to write it with the great Frank MacDonald, who's a good friend locally here. And then in the end, we both stopped doing it because it didn't seem right. And then all of a sudden, when the club started taking off again, I just thought, as I've got older, let's get it done. I'm not doing it because I think I'm going to make a fat load of money. In fact, it probably cost me money, but I just want to get it out to as many people, and there'll be an opportunity to get in touch with me to discuss the book when they've read it, if anything bothers people or they want to know more. So I'm all in favor of reaching out to the fans of soccer, helping the game grow, letting people understand. And I want to inspire coaches to see my story, and I think it will inspire them and the players, because my journey has been, it's been very fruitful, bumpy at times, and you've had to roll your sleeves up many times and to show people you can really do it in coaching or on the field. And you know, I'm going to be 79 soon, and I'm hoping to get over to, I was looking at flights the other day actually, so I'm fit enough right now to be able to go over to England for a book signing. I'm very good contacts in Vancouver, BC, and of course here in Seattle. But I'm thrilled with the early response. I've got 3 buyers right now that have all agreed to buy 100, which is a lot. And I've got many, many, many individuals, 25 here and 10 here. And I've got people buying the book on behalf of many of their friends. And I think I'm a salesman, put it that way.
Alan, if you can find your way from Seattle and have a nice little stopover in DC, you let me know, and I'll buy you a drink and a meal, and we can chat a bit more.
Well, that's very kind. But if you're the same when you come to Seattle, come here. I'll take care of you.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll grab a plane. I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay.
Couple more questions for you, Alan. How has the professional game changed from when you played to today? How's it different? How's it evolved? How's it changed? Is it better? Is it worse?
I think the overall talent of the players is. Don't forget, I mean, they have dietitians today. They have many people behind the scenes helping players prepare on and off the field behavior. You know, I've been in the bar after the games, and there's been very few players, whereas in my day, the bar would be totally packed. I think if players in my day would have had the same opportunity to get as fit and as well taken care of as they are today, I think the great players of the past would still be great players today. The difference in the game today is the money that the players earn. I don't think the players are as close to the fans as we used to be with the fans in my day. They certainly sign autographs way differently, which is not as affectionate in regard to the young kid that they're signing for. But I admire the players today. There's some wonderful players. You know, the game in England's gone from almost exclusively English, Scottish, Irish, and Welsh players into players from all over the world. I don't have a problem with that because I think the best players should be on the best teams, and I admire De Bruyne, fabulous player. He seems like a nice young man. I think he makes £1 million a month. I just read Alan Hudson talking about if he would have made £1 million a month, he'd have had a bar. and it would have been free booze for all of his friends and fans. But you know, the game is doing, it's at the crossroads in many ways. I mean, I can't wait for the Champions League final between Manchester City and Chelsea. That will be.
Who's winning that game?
Mm.
Who's going to win that game, Man City or Chelsea?
Do you know, I like both teams. I like both coaches. When Barcelona was here in Seattle, I went to the press conference and I asked Guardiola, who was then coaching. He got all the 3 trophies on the top table while he was doing the interview. And of course, being a soccer guy, I asked him a real question. And I said, how are you going to follow this, Pep? And he gave me a great answer. He says, oh, I'll take every game as it comes. And I thought, typical, easy answer, you know. But,
yeah.
You know, some of these coaches, they've got so much money. I mean, Cullis, after he got fired by Birmingham all those years ago, having done what he did at Wolves, apparently had to go and get a job. Well, can you imagine Mourinho? He's been paid off, and he's done a great job for the game. He's been paid up many times.
I think he's made something like 70 million just out of being sacked.
No, but it's also they get the best advice with how to handle that financing, and stock market has done well. Homes have done well in terms of going up in value. So everything's in their favor. But, you know, I don't blame the coach for getting big money. I think it's the owner who signs the contract. And these owners are, in some cases, billionaires. Can you imagine how much money that they'll rake in from streaming video and television rights for this Champions League final?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be absurd.
He might be the most watched game in the world. Maybe even more than the World Cup final. I don't know. But I think if we can get this pandemic behind us and get the fans back into the game, I think we've got a good period of time to look forward to. I just want Derby County to sort themselves out.
That brings me to my next question, Alan. What are your thoughts on Derby today? When you watch him, having played in the golden era, and you see where Derby now are, 4th bottom in the 2nd division. How do you fix it?
Well, it would have been fixed if those directors of Clough and Taylor and Mackay and Anderson would have been stronger and kept those winning coaches, championship winners, instead of putting their own ego first and trying to be strict and old school. And the game's changed. You know, coaches are very powerful today, but players are probably a little bit more powerful. I mean, don't forget in my day, if you didn't have a shave, Cloughie would say, "Get that off your face, you look like a tramp." And it's a different world today, and I like the game. I don't go crazy to make sure I watch every game. I do watch YouTube. I'm very fond of Arlo White, who does a great job on NBC Sports Network. He began his television soccer career at the Sounders. I could see he was going to be a star. I remember Mike Ingham at Derby Radio. It was pretty clear he was going to be a star. So, you know, looking at the game like I do, I'd love to find a future star who hits me. I don't need to check every player today, but I watch the game closely, and I like to find out who I think is going to be the next star player.
What hobbies do you have away from football? What else do you enjoy doing? Obviously, you like going out and socializing and things like that, but what are some of your other hobbies?
I follow English horse racing every day. I don't bet. I had enough of that when I was playing. But I watch English horse racing. I love William Buick, and I love is it the Skelton family over the jumps. I think they're wonderful. I watch the stock market quite closely. Over the years, done pretty well in there. And I have a lot of friends, and we text each other more now than we've ever done. I have quite a lot of big brothers, if you like, who are my age or a bit older, who have known me forever, who knew me when I had issues, and they helped me out, and they still do today, and I'm there for them. So there's never a dull moment. I have 3 wonderful grandchildren. One's just graduated from college. Matteo, who helped us setting up this Zoom. He's just graduated from Santa Clara. He's waiting to go to law school. And the youngest daughter, Isabel, has got 2 more years in college. So life is good. Couldn't have found a better place to live than Seattle. It's really wonderful. It has the seasons. I'm looking out the window now, looking at the beautiful green trees, and then later on tonight, I might go down to my favorite bar by the water. Life is good. I go to the coffee shop every day. I went into the coffee shop today, Starbucks, and there was 8 policemen out there with their coffee. And I talked to him, and there happened to be one guy from Australia. And he didn't, and I said, "You're from Sydney," and I was right. And I said to him, I said, "If I was a rich guy, I'd buy all you guys a cup of coffee." And they were laughing, but you know, the world is a little bit complicated right now, but in the end, you've got to try and do good every day, and kind and helpful to people, and that's what I try to do.
And Alan, another thing I'll sweeten the pot for you when you come to Washington and we hang out. My mom also really enjoys horse racing and has been around horses for a long time, so we can take you to a horse race as well.
Oh yeah, I love it, and at Wolves, at Forest, at Derby. The best time we had at Derby was when Francis Lee and Rod Thomas bought a horse called I don't know what it was called now. Anyway, it won one day at 10-1. And they didn't tell anybody, including me, and I was their mate. And they gave me £100. They put money on for me, but they didn't want me telling all my mates, because they used to say in the old days, if you give somebody a tip, they'll tell somebody, you might as well tell 111. They had this racehorse, and I think it won twice. And then we'd go to the racetrack with Dave Mackay when he was a player at Derby, Utoxeter. And Dave thought it was easy winning at the horses. I'm not sure he always told us the truth, but horse racing, and I like being around good people. And there's a lot of good people in my life, and I'm still cancer free 6.5 years later, so I'm living on borrowed time.
There's a lot to be grateful for in your life if you've got good health and you've got a great family. I mean, that's the dream right there.
Well,
and you never want to go to the races with me, Alan, because I went to Southall Racecourse last time I was in England. And I literally picked a loser in every race. So I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to this.
That's near Nottingham, right?
The what?
Southall.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Two more questions for you before I let you go. If you could talk to a young player today, a footballer, soccer player in England or in the Pacific Northwest or anywhere, what piece of advice would you give them?
Find a champion. Find a champion, because you know your parents are going to be your champion. Find a champion who's done it, who knows what he's talking about, who cares about you, and knows exactly what you need to do to get into a better player. find a champion. I've had plenty of champions, and I salute the champions that have been there for me. But tell a young player to get a champion, find a champion.
And if you could give one piece of life advice to somebody, what would that piece of life advice be? Not football advice, just normal life advice.
I think I've heard it many times is, treat people nicely on the way up, because the chances are you'll meet them on the way down the other side. And I think, that's an interesting quotation. But, I've always tried to give of myself, never ever looking for something in return. But I will tell you, because I've been that way all my life, people are being really nice to me right now. And I think, go the extra mile for your friends. I'll tell you one quick story. I took a boys team over to England 2 times, U16, took them to all the big stadiums, played against Arsenal boys and England boys at Lilleshall. I remember being at, I think it's a castle in Derbyshire, where the Lord Derbyshire lived, and I took my boys around this castle, and then we're in the bus, and we're going past this really old churchyard, and I said to the driver, "Will you stop, please?" And he stopped, and I said to the boys, "We're going to look in this old church." First of all, there was 2 of the kids had baseball hats on. I said, "You can get your hats off. We're going into church. You don't do that." So we go in the church, and then we come out, and I saw one of the boys looking at the old gravestones. And I thought this was a life lesson experience that I was just going to share with them. So I called all the boys in, and I said to this kid, I go, "How old did that person die on that gravestone?" And he said, "Coach, 1752. That's how old the churchyard was." So I said, "Here's a lesson for you guys. I'll bet you every person in this that's buried in this churchyard, in which there's hundreds, if they could wake up for 5 minutes, they would tell you they could have done more for life, they could have done more for each other, and been a better family man." And they were quiet. And then we go into the next town, and we stopped at a coffee shop, and one of the young men said to me, "Coach, that speech was awesome." I also took a different group. We played in the New York soccer tournament. And I took the boys to 9/11 site, which was then a huge hole in the ground. Now, can you imagine 20, 16-year-old boys and their families looking at this horrific site of 9/11? I've never known them so quiet in my life. It was a memory. Unfortunately, they'll always remember, including me, but I've always tried to find an opportunity. I remember one time we're in the semi-final of the state championship against a tough team, and Bernie James, who I love to death, is the crossfire guy. He got me in touch with the representative from Snickers bars, and the guy sent me a great big box of Snickers bars. So before the game, I put the Snickers bar box on the bench, and one of the players said, "What are you going to do with those Snickers bars, coach?" And I said, "Here's what I'm going to do. If you lose, I'm going to take the box of Snickers bars over to the other bench to give to their players." And I guess what? We won easy, because that motivated, because they wanted those Snickers bars. And it's easy playing with young people's minds at times. But, I've been involved in some wonderful stories, and most of them will be in my book. So,
Well, Alan, I've took up more than enough of your afternoon and your morning, and I cannot thank you enough for this conversation. You are, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the other side of the Zoom, but you're one of my all-time favorite Derby County players. And it's been always, when I've watched those YouTube videos, I just thought if I could just spend 5 minutes talking to Alan Hinton about football, and you've spent well over an hour and a half with me. So I cannot thank you enough for coming on and speaking to me.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and you did a great job. And I'm sorry I rambled on too much, but that's me.
No,
I have zero notes, I want you to know. And I'm also going to get my hair cut in about an hour from now. So
well, you're looking. I like it. I like it. You should keep it going.
All right. Anyway, you did a great job, Cory. So give my best to your dad, okay?
I will, Mr. Hinton. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
And that's all we've got time for, everyone, in this episode of the Rams Review Podcast. And so there's only one thing left to say, and that's up the Rams.
Up the Rams.